Welcome to the Sustainable Success Show, where we share real-world ideas, strategies, and systems to help you build success that lasts in business and life. Each episode delivers practical insights you can apply immediately without burnout, chaos, or short-term fixes that don't scale. At the foundation is emotional intelligence and effective communication, how you lead yourself and how you connect with others across personalities, generations, and cultures, because that's where trust, engagement, and performance are created. I'm Christopher Salem, your host, and this is where sustainable success becomes your competitive advantage. Hi, welcome to the Sustainable Success Show. I'm your host, Chris Salem. We hope everyone is having a great week, and if you found us here at Sustainable Success, we want to welcome you for the first-time listeners. Again, we've been around now for going on 9 years. It's hard to believe our show has been around that long. But nonetheless, we recently went over to a new format. Yes, started this year, where now we went from an hour-long show, which originally started off as a live radio show. We were live back in 2017. That's how we used to do it, for an hour. But nonetheless, things change over time. People like to consume content in different ways, and we adapted to what was important to you. We are a half an hour show now. If anybody that was used to the old format, we are now a half an hour, and we also have a video portion of the show, which you can watch on our YouTube channel at Christopher R. Salem. But again, if you are a new listener, welcome here to the Sustainable Success Show. Each and every week, we bring in subject matter experts sharing their words of wisdom and insights to help elevate you and your business to the next level with cutting-edge, innovative, and disruptive ideas in order to do so. You could also follow us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, iHeart, and of course, again, our YouTube channel. And finally, at Facebook at Sustainable Success 2017. There you can listen to any of the episodes we've had, not only for the new format, but also our old format that goes back again almost 9 years, back to May of 2017. We have a lot of content that you could tap into and a lot of great information. Today's show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it is a membership program taking out all the noise out of social media. You get to generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to interact with. If you'd like some more information about Alumni Direct, check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about radical responsibility. And before I spill the beans on that, this is going to be something that again, I like you to think about on an individual, team, and organizational or business level. It all starts in how we reframe our leadership accountability, using practical systems to reshape our culture, performance, and for sustainable growth. We got the right person here to deliver this valuable insight. He also has a podcast, books around the subject, and we're going to be talking with Maull, and I'll give you a little background about Fleet before. And again, it's quite extensive, but I want to make sure that you get to know this gentleman. He just brings so much value here. And so Fleet has helped overwhelmed founders and scaling entrepreneurs step out of survival mode into CEO-level leadership. He draws on 25 plus years experience as a business strategist and founder of multiple mission-driven ventures, including an Inc. 5000 company. Fleet developed a high-impact MBA program specifically for bootstrapped entrepreneurs looking to break through to 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 figure bottlenecks. His immersive program isn't just about business coaching. It's a complete recalibration on how leaders approach growth, delegation, and sustainability. His work combines proven operational strategies with mindset mastery, helping founders replace burnout with vision, build aligned teams, and unlock years of progress in a fraction of the time. Now, Fleet is also a globally respected meditation teacher with decades of deep training in Zen and Tibetan traditions. He is the creator of Neuro-Somatic Mindfulness, a powerful synthesis of contemplative practice and cutting-edge neuroscience. His mindset and meditation coaching is geared towards high-achieving professionals and entrepreneurs ready to scale their inner world alongside their business impact. Now, he is the host of, as I mentioned, of his podcast, Radical Responsibility. We'll encourage you, and you'll get information on how you can subscribe to his podcast, where he interviews top-tier thought leaders in entrepreneurship, neuroscience, trauma, and performance, including guests like Jack Canfield. We've had Jack on our show here at Sustainable Success. Some of you remember that a few years ago. Dave Asprey, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and Dan Sullivan. The show reflects the depth, rigor, and clarity that Fleet brings into every conversation. And without further ado, we welcome Fleet Maull to the show. Fleet, how you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me, Christopher.
Pleasure to have you here. And Fleet, we always like to start the show, to kind of set the foundation for what you're going to share this valuable insight about radical responsibility. We always like to get, find out where it all started with you way back, what got you to where you are today, and, really blessing the world and corporations worldwide, businesses of all sizes, about radical responsibility.
Well, given your half-hour format, I'll try to do that really briefly. I'm a baby boomer. I grew up in the Midwest in the 1950s. A family that had a family business in the food manufacturing industry, and just the way things conspire with my life and family. There was some alcoholism in the family. Coming of age into the 60s, I kind of graduated high school as an angry young man, went headlong into the counterculture, and I was always a spiritual seeker as well. And before I could untangle all that, I earned my way into a federal prison sentence. I spent 14 years in federal prison on drug charges from 1985 to 1999. Fortunately, I went in with a lot of skills. I already had done a 3-year deep clinical training program integrating Western and Eastern psychology and psychotherapies. And I earned my PhD while I did all the coursework for my PhD while I was in prison, finished the dissertation later on. But it was really in prison that my radical responsibility philosophy was born, because when I got there, fortunately, I had enough background to realize I was in an incredibly negative, corrosive environment. And that if I wasn't really proactive about it, I could come out bitter and broken and negative. And I didn't want to live that way while I was there. I certainly didn't want to come out that way. I was originally sentenced at 30 years, no parole. Fortunately, after my appeal went through the courts, took about 3 years. They knocked off 5, so I brought it down to 25. And because I was sentenced under the old sentencing laws, prior to 1987, you got a lot of good time if you stayed out of trouble, which is not easy to do in prison by manage. These days, there's almost no good time, sadly. People that get big sentences, they're there, barring a presidential pardon, they're there for a long time. At any rate, I ended up serving 14. But and once I knew that, once I kind of figured that out, although I had no surety really that I would survive my time, or because it was a dangerous place, or that I managed to stay out of trouble and do only 14. But at any rate, thinking in terms of 14, I knew I'd be 50 when I was going to get out and have a criminal record and be broke. In fact, the IRS had a big assessment against me, and it's not going to be easy to start a life. So 2 things. I wanted to do everything I could do to be able to create something for myself post-prison if I managed to survive my time there. I also wanted to contribute while I was there to that community. My son was 9 years old when I got locked up, and that was just devastating to face all the incredibly selfish decisions I'd made for so long, putting his life at risk. And so I was bound and determined to do something with my time to leave a better legacy for my son than just his dad went to prison, right? And so I really worked at it. It was my monastery time, my training time. I led an incredibly disciplined life. I taught school for 14 years, which was a great training ground. Was very active in 12-step work, led a meditation group, started the first hospice in a federal prison, in any prison in the world, and started 2 national nonprofit organizations that are thriving today. So, but really what came to me was, I had a lot of people that contributed to me getting the big sentence I got. I did a lot of people's time, let's say it that way. I was never going to testify against anyone, not because I'm some kind of tough guy, just I'm a Buddhist. And the idea of trading my suffering for somebody else's family is going to suffer instead of me, it just doesn't make sense in my mind. So anyway, I did a lot of people's time. And when the government prosecutes you, they break all the rules, they break all the laws, they play hardball, right? So I could have focused on all that. And I realized that was going to be a complete waste of time. And what I needed to focus on was taking 500% responsibility of having got myself there, what I was going to do with it, and whatever future I'd be able to create for myself. And with that philosophy, I was able to create all kinds of programs that normally prisoners can't start. I was able to start 2 national nonprofit organizations that are thriving today. And all that came out of this philosophy of focusing on what can I do? No matter how difficult, challenging the circumstances, no matter how seemingly unjust or unfair, really the setting question is, am I going to let that take me into a victim mindset, or am I going to focus on what can I do? What's the most creative way I can respond to this situation to move my life forward in terms of my long-term interests, which usually ends up being in everybody else's long-term interests because we're all interconnected. So that's where this philosophy was born, and I got out in 1999, so about 27 years ago, and I've had nothing but opportunity since based on that work I did and that philosophy.
Well, Fleet, I want to admire you for your resilience and how you turned something that, can be, was, in this case, someone going to prison, and how you turned this into, an opportunity, not only for yourself, but, how you blessed other people. And I related to you on many fronts because I can relate growing up being a very angry young man growing up, just due to the circumstances of my childhood. And, also a friend of Bill here, struggled with 12 years of addiction. My brother was in and out of prison, from that same kind of environment. But nonetheless, people like you come out ahead, and eventually, obviously, I did as well. And we share many similar views on and how we look at life, and being a Buddhist and so on. So I'm so blessed to have you on the show. Share with us the insights from what you've learned, and how we can think differently, and how it impacts our behavior, our attitude, our how we communicate, and what we can be doing better as leaders, when we are either in public, we're in the business sense, or any combination thereof.
Yeah. So, right out of prison, I started a management consulting company. Now, how being in prison for 14 years qualifies you to do that? It took me 6 months to get my first client, but I got my first client, negotiated a $5,000 a month retainer, and I was off and running and never looked back. So I think a lot of the skills I learned while I was inside, the influence of my first meditation, my first Buddhist teacher, a Tibetan master, he was really focused on skillfulness. What works, what doesn't work, right? How do you connect with people? How do you relate with people? What moves things forward in a positive way? Not so much what's right and wrong. It's not that he didn't have a moral compass. He absolutely did. But focusing rather than on that, on what works, right? What creates benefit? What creates harm, right? And so when I was in there, I was in what's called a total environment, a totalitarian system where the authorities have all the power, and literally resistance was futile. And so how do you get anything done there? Because the first answer to anything you asked was always no. And so I had to figure out how to work with people, both my fellow prisoners and the prison staff and administrators. And also another context from my Buddhist background is that of innate basic goodness, that all human beings have innate unconditional basic goodness. It may be buried a bit under all the stuff that we inherit from, whatever our situation is growing up, but it's there. And, we all have like these buttons on us. So if you push somebody's authority button or fear button or jealous, that's what you're going to get. But if you can find their human button, right, the button, they'll respond. Not in a manipulative way, but if you're honest and straightforward and you relate with people, people will get enrolled. If you're enrolled in, first of all, if you're clear about what you're doing and your motivations, right, and it's about benefit for others, and if you're really enrolled in that, then others will get enrolled in what you're going to do too, So I was able to accomplish a lot during those years. And so coming out and beginning to work as a management consultant, I had the ability to sit around with C-suite leaders in all kinds of meetings, one-on-ones meetings, board meetings, strategic planning meetings, and just listen, be in a state of not knowing, and just pick up on what was going on, because I'd been in that environment where I had to really be able to read the environment just to survive, right? It was a very dangerous place I was. And to survive and get things done, I had to be really sensitive and develop a lot of emotional intelligence and a lot of insight. And it really was just being in an open state of mind. And so doing that, I was able to be really effective in helping leaders discover the solutions to their challenges. And of course, doing that year after year, I developed a lot of expertise in a lot of different industries. But it was really the context that I brought more than anything else to leaders was this context of radical responsibility and realizing that that's not a burden, it's not a should, it's where all our power is, it's where all our freedom is. It's natural. We're all going to spend a little time kvetching when things aren't going our way, but how much energy do we really want to waste there, right? Because it's a complete waste of energy. I mean, we also need to approach this with self-compassion. We're human beings, right? So it's not about shooting ourselves or beating up on ourselves. If, I'm struggling or this, this really sucks. Okay, take 5 minutes, experience that, and then drop it. Okay, what am I going to do? Or what are we going to do as a team? And there's so much power in that to really focus our energy on creativity. And I make this distinction between living down in the drama zone where we get involved in blaming circumstances, blaming others, shaming ourselves, making excuses, justifying our own behaviors, all these kinds of things, getting caught on all those narratives of disempowerment and the victim mindset, versus which just creates chaos and drama, versus shifting into what I call the empowerment zone, where we're focused on taking radical ownership for our circumstances, being completely accountable to others, and being genuine, open, and real, which creates trust. And when you can create that kind of trust with people, there's no end to what you can do because you're going to draw the best from people, right? And you're going to create environments where people feel empowered and they don't feel blamed and they feel free to make mistakes and they feel free to learn. And you can create really powerful creative environments because that's our role as leaders. Our role as leaders, whether we're leading a team or we're leading a whole company of whatever size, is to create a culture and an environment where people can really thrive, where people feel that they have the permission to experiment, to make mistakes, and to bring forth their best. And, they're going to get rewarded for the winners, but they're not going to get punished for trying, right? And they're not going to get shamed for trying, right? You create this environment where people will really thrive, right? It's one question I've often asked leaders in terms of their core team or maybe their leadership team, like just on a daily, weekly basis, how many new ideas are your team members generating? Right? And that's a really good marker because if there's not a lot of ideas coming up, that means there's some repression going down, whether it's shame or fear or whatever it is, right? But if you really open up the doors of creativity, your people are going to be generating constant ideas, and that's what all businesses thrive on, and especially in today's world because things are changing so fast with artificial intelligence and other things. It's so competitive and changing so quickly. We have to be in a constant state of, it's not about pivoting once, we have to be in a constant pivot, a constant state of innovation, constantly being in a state of curiosity about our business model and is that business model appropriate to what's going on? We just have to continually innovate. And so you can't do that by yourself, right? You have to create a team and a culture that will do that with you.
Love it. And so true. Cause a lot of times, you always hear, hey, this is the way we've always done it. Well, okay, maybe it got you through, wherever, through a number of years doing it that way. But like you said, things are changing at lightning speed. Technology is behind that. And, we're in a different generational era now. We got Gen Z, you being a baby boomer, I'm being an older Gen X. It's different and how, so we have to be able to adapt. And I love what you said about creating that transparency and creating a psychologically safe environment so that people don't feel like, well, they'll think I'm stupid or think I'm incompetent. No, if you need help, great, ask for it. If you have an idea, I don't care if you think it's stupid or not, share it. And that's the type of stuff that, where those organizations, for the most part, in my opinion, in my experience, come out ahead. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, today most of my energy goes into leading my own company, Heart Mind Institute. But as a management consultant, I led a lot of design processes, creative planning processes, strategic planning processes. And whenever I was working with a room, right, could be a CEO and or business owner and their leadership team, or smaller companies, maybe we could get the whole company in the room or whatever. But we're in a room, and my job, number one job, was to create a safe space. To create a safe space, because otherwise people are editing themselves, they're looking around, they don't want to look stupid, they're aware of the pecking order, who's me, And one of the things I always did with that, I had to reinforce it. It usually takes 2 or 3 hours for the room to really just start to feel safe enough that people's creativity starts to explode. But one of the things I always had to do with the leader, I had to sit down with them and coach them on how to create a safe space, because a lot of them don't know how. And I would actually have them make a statement at the beginning of a day of that kind of work about that This is a completely safe space. We expect respectful communication, but we also expect people to say their truths and speak reality. And nobody will be punished for anything that happens here. Nobody will be shamed for anything that happens here. We want your best ideas. We want your real opinions. If things aren't working, we want you to tell us that. So let's create that kind of environment. And then I have to get, often I'll have to challenge the leader throughout the day if they fall into patterns that the room starts, So it takes some work. And a lot of leaders, the balance between leading, which for a lot of leaders ends up feeling like the need to be in control, the need to be in charge. And there is an element of, taking charge. Somebody's got to draw the line and, say, either get out of the way or get on board, right? And you do need leadership, but if we confuse that with control and domination, then we end up creating a very lonely job for ourselves and a very non-creative or uncreative environment.
Yeah, so true. What would you say, for, our listeners listening now that, wow, this is, radical. And what would be that first step that you would recommend someone that says, even if they can't make the overall decision, maybe they're not the CEO or the owner of the company, but yet they're a leader in the organization. What would be that first step that you would recommend they take when it comes to radical responsibility?
Well, we're all going to find ourselves in moments of the impulse to blame, to complain, right? And usually we're feeling unhappy about something in whatever way, and we're projecting the causation of that on someone or something outside of ourselves. And that involves, you statements, they statements, and it's projective language and it's blaming language. So we need to train ourselves to recognize when we're doing that and just stop, take a breath, and switch to I statements, which is the language of ownership, right? And withdraw our projections. Instead, reflect. What am I feeling here? Wow, well, I'm really frustrated. Actually, I'm kind of fearful about what's happening, or I'm confused, or and just keep acknowledge what I'm feeling. I may think those emotions are related to something out there, but really they're mine. They're my internal experience. And then get curious about, all right, so what are those arising from? What are the unmet needs those are difficult emotions are arising from? My need for clarity, or my need for responsibility, or my need for being able to lead, my need for reasonable authority in my domain, or my need for this or that, my need for fair compensation, whatever it might be. And this takes us completely off what I call the drama triangle, that activation of where we get caught in toxic drama and emotional triggering. Because, when we're triggered, the reptilian brain's in charge. And to the extent that our locus of control moves from the smart part of our brain back to the survival part of our brain, we're not very smart. We don't make very good decisions. So engaging in this kind of ownership process, reflective process, takes us back into full use of our brain where we can make much better decisions. And then we can kind of look, okay, what's really going on here, right? And then what I call the magical radical responsibility question is, what can I do? And as soon as we ask that question, even if we're in a situation that seems very unfair or unjust or impossible or complicated, or we feel like we have a supervisor that's really being a jerk, or whatever it is, whatever the situation is, as soon as I shift to what can I do, there's always a million things we can do. There's a million ways we can approach any person, any situation. It gets us back into the mindset of creativity. It gets us out of the victim mindset into the mindset of creativity and the mindset of possibility. And that's where all the juice, where all the creativity, where all the success and all the fun is, right? And it's just that simple shift. But it really, we have to make that, every time we make that shift, we're training ourselves to make it more readily the next time, right? And every time we allow ourselves to spend a lot of time in strategizing around how to survive in a triangulation of victim mindset and persecuting and rescuing and blaming and all the toxicity of the drama triangle and all that. Anytime we spend there, we're just reinforcing that. We're reinforcing our neural architecture that's going to take us in that way. Anytime we make the shift into what can I do, into that creative realm of possibility, we're actually we're transforming the very neural architecture of our brain to make it more likely that that's the choice, that'll become our instinct going forward. And we'll find we're naturally living in this world of creativity and possibility instead of living in this world of problems and complaints.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful stuff. We hope listeners, you're letting this sink in. We encourage everybody to go back and listen to this episode again. when what you heard what Fleet has shared. There's a lot of golden nuggets and insights. What could be some other insights that you could share for our listeners, Fleet, in other areas that maybe perhaps you haven't covered when it comes to radical responsibility on an individual and how that plays into how that can impact your example of resourcefulness for your team and organization?
Well, to take that to a little deeper level, and this has to do with my 5 decades of integration of all the contemplative meditative traditions of the East and West with current neuroscience. If we want to be a self-led leader, and if we're going to be a positive influence on others, we first have to get in a leadership position with ourselves. To get in a leadership position with ourselves, we have to learn how to self-regulate. We have this autonomic nervous system. It has 2 branches. One upregulates for alertness, but then that goes into stress, can go into panic and acting out. And we have the parasympathetic downregulating, relax and rest and digest, rest and response, so forth. So these are happening all the time, and they're connected with the breath. And we can learn to regulate. So if we're getting too upregulated, we can bring ourselves right back down. If we're too downregulated, we bring ourselves up. And there's an appropriate balance for those, for any situation we're in, whether it's a business meeting, at home with our family, out socially, responding to a crisis at work, being in a state of readiness in a kind of high-risk area. All these, there's an appropriate balance there. And we can learn to regulate ourselves primarily with simple breath tools, where we use our breath to regulate our own autonomic nervous system. If we can regulate our own autonomic nervous system, we can then regulate our own emotions, which doesn't mean suppress our emotions. It means we can experience them in a balanced way, because our emotions contain a lot of information, a lot of wisdom.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we don't have to get hijacked by them, right? If we have a well-regulated nervous system, if we have skills for regulating it when it's starting to get out of kilter, then we can also regulate our emotions, which means we can regulate our behaviors, which means we're in the driver's seat of our own life. It means we're moving into self-leadership. Actually, the name of my next book coming out is called Radical Self-Leadership. And really, this is key for leaders. If we're going to be a leader influencing others, we first have to lead ourselves. And it really comes down to learning the skills of managing our own neurophysiology and our own psychology and our own emotions and so forth. And in doing so, there's so much insight, because we're like, we're electromagnetic beings, we're emotional beings, we're energy beings, and we're constantly putting out energy and information into the field relationally with others and groups, and we're constantly receiving data. And when we become a well-regulated, open, aware, awake person, we're getting a lot more information about the world we're in. We're getting a lot more information about the people we're interacting with, the teams we're leading. We're just seeing what needs to be done, right? Sometimes I've been in spaces where I've watched facilitators and leaders do things that are just amazing. Like, how did they know to ask that question? How did they know to intervene? It's because they're just seeing it. They're seeing the data, right? And so training ourselves, it really begins with mastering our own neurophysiology,
I love it.
transforming our own neural architecture. That's where it really begins.
Yeah. That is so powerful. And it's so true, because we now, once we're in control of our emotions, we won't react. We can respond, and it impacts our behavior, our communication, our attitude, and our level of action. Wow, this is powerful. We have to have you back on for a second go around with this show. We'll make sure we'll discuss that after. Just powerful. I know we're towards the end of the show, and I want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to reach out and get to know you better. Before doing that, I want to thank you personally for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here today, as well as our team here at Sustainable Success. How can the audience get in touch with you? What are you up to, and anything that you'd like to provide them?
Well, they can find my company, HeartMind Institute, at heartmind.co, heartmind.co. And we put on big online summits throughout the year at the intersection of all these inner technologies, current neuroscience, and so forth. We have our own entrepreneurship training program. We have a summit that'll be July of 2026, the Entrepreneurial Mastery Summit. You'll be able to find that at our website, heartmind.co. We also have our 3-month intensive training program, which we're relaunching probably in July or August, and it's going to be called Owner-Operator to CEO Accelerator. And really, that's, so many business owners get into business looking for that freedom, looking to be their own boss, and they find themselves wearing too many hats, too much involved in control, don't know how to liberate themselves from that, and they end up overwhelmed in their businesses rather than experiencing that true freedom. And it really takes a lot of training to get oneself into that true CEO mindset, and that's what we focus on there. So also people can find you mentioned the Radical Responsibility podcast. They can find that probably through that site, but also my basic website, fleetmaull.com. They can find the podcast there.
We'll make sure, Fleet, and everybody listening, that will all be in the show notes as well. So all of that information, and we highly encourage you to reach out to Fleet, connect with him. Fleet, thank you so much again for taking the time to be here. Just great insights, and we look forward to having you on another show to kind of follow up where we left off with what you shared with us today.
You're very welcome, Christopher. Sometimes people think some of that stuff I was talking about is the so-called soft stuff. I think it's really the essential hard stuff.
Oh, it is. I support that 1,000%. Thank you. And listeners, we want to thank you each and every week joining us here at Sustainable Success. Again, we are committed to bringing in subject matter experts like a Fleet in to share their insights, personal experience to help elevate you and your business to the next level. If you would like to hear future content that we have not covered, which is kind of hard to believe after being on the air for 9 years, but nonetheless, we missed a few things. Feel free to reach out to our team here at Chris@sustainablesuccess.net. That's Chris@sustainablesuccess.net. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Friday, 12 o'clock East Coast time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Take care.